Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. This is a special transmission to commemorate the Kashmiri sacrifices and of course highlight the human rights violations, the brutality that's happening of course in Jammu Kashmir by the Indian Armed Forces, the Indian state. As we know, there is Pakistan observes YOUM-E-ISTEHSAL-E-KASHMIR tomorrow on 5th of August. We'll be talking about the Kashmiri brethren, their sacrifices and of course Pakistan's resolve and their continued support for the Kashmiris. I have with me today Brigadier Waqar Khan, who's a senior analyst. Thank you for joining us today. We also have with us Zaman Bajwa, who's Executive Director, Youth Forum for Kashmir. Thank you for joining us today. Brigadier Sahab, you know, we've spoken about this from time to time as far as the sacrifices of the Kashmiris are concerned and Pakistan's resolve. We've always stood by them. Unfortunately, the brutality from Indian armed forces and the state as a whole, and I don't mean just the armed forces, of course Indian state, their Supreme Court, over time we've seen there's a concentrated effort to change the demography, to change overall the whole makeup of Jammu and Kashmir. How successful do you think they've been? Because the world also now realizes to some extent what's happening in Kashmir.
I think it's very, very unfortunate that especially since 5th August 2019, I think India has operated in 6 domains. Definitely demographic is one side. One is of course administrative, where they have, or geographic, they have actually bisected the state. You have Ladakh and then you have Delhi and Jammu, and now there is an effort going on to finally bisect this part of Kashmir into Jammu state and Kashmir Valley, maybe later on. Then we have legal, which has their domestic law. They have amendments in the constitution, the Kashmir, occupied Kashmir law, international law, whether it was bilateral or international UN resolutions, Shimla agreement, and even confidence building measures later on. And then of course they basically got it stamped through the Supreme Court, which I feel is basically a kangaroo court, because the plea by the Kashmiris was not properly addressed. Since I think out of 5 judges, 3 were Brahman who were sitting there, and that has been, even in case of Babri Mosque, that was the percentage. Then comes basically psychosocial, where there is a cultural war against Kashmiris, whether it is their language or their faith. There is a direct assault. Then there is a military aspect that you have pumped in almost 1.1 million regular and paramilitary. And in case you look at the percentage, it's almost 6 soldiers, 6 Kashmiris with 1 soldier on 6 Kashmiris, which is I think mostly dense deployment of military. And then I think is the genocidal, as you mentioned, and I'll just quote Ranganathan, one of their scientists. I think last in June, he came up with the idea that we should follow the Israeli model. And you know that already the Gaza carnage was going on, it's going on still.
Yes.
So people are trying to connect it with what they are thinking. And before that, the Consul General in New York had very openly stated, just after I think 5th August 2019, who was a diplomat, that we are going to apply the Israeli model of settlements. So it means that in all these 4 or 5 domains, there is an assault. But if you look at the results, whether there are let's say India, Kashmiri leaders like Mahbub Mufti or Abdullahs, they have not, I think, gone with the decision, and they are very vocal. But I don't endorse what they have done in the past, but still I think the common Kashmiri also feels like, especially loss of statehood. Then comes the elections. They tried very hard and BJP couldn't score anything, and there was almost less than 10% of the vote. And now we have another trend visible, if you look at Kashmir, occupied Kashmir, south of Pir Panjal range. There is activity picking up by the I would say freedom fighters. They have been attacking Indian military in Riyasi, in Udhampur. They have Northern Command headquarters. So it means that again people are so much fed up that probably they are going to resort to armed struggle.
I want to talk more about the youth also and their Zaman Sahab, your Executive Director, Youth Forum for Kashmir, particularly in the last couple of years. How do you feel the youth also? We saw what happened to Burhan Wani, and we've seen, overall, since then, there is this, obviously we've seen the struggle. There's no doubt that the youth has always struggled for the Kashmiri cause. But now the resolve there, how do you look at it? And in terms of, the way that there's a concentrated struggle and the way that it's picked up in the last, couple of years or so.
Actually, when you see the illegal acts of India on 5 August 2019, you see that actually India miscalculated the situation. He was thinking that we will just only scrap all these laws, special status of Kashmir, and people will not react. And maybe there will be some reactions only in the downtown of the valley. But after when they revoked these articles, they saw the situation that there was a continuous communication lockdown. Not only the youth of Kashmir, but all the people of the Kashmir from all the regions. Actually, they divided into two union territories. But the people of the valley, Jammu and Ladakh, they came on the streets and they just demanded their right to self-determination. Actually, the illegal acts of the 5 August, Kashmiri considered that this is the attack on their identity. This is the attack on the Kashmirian. And for not for a single day, they just accepted. And actually, they negated the slogan of the normalcy. India was looking to show the normalcy in that region, but the people of Kashmir rejected all these slogans, and they said that they are out for their right to self-determination. And you see the examples of the brave Kashmiri young people, especially the journalists, when there was a totally communication lockdown due to the COVID, and after they just closed all the communication channels. But the brave journalists of the valley came out on the streets, and they wrote about what is happening over there in Kashmir. And in that case, you saw the journalists like the Asaf Shah. He was put behind the bars for 5 years, and just 1 month ago he was released. And there is other example of the Sana Matu. She was a photojournalist. She won the Pulitzer's Award, but due to the fear that she will narrate her story on the international arena, in the Modi administration just put ban on his travel, and they didn't allow the Sana Matu to go over there and to present Kashmir over there. So these are the
ban, and of course, the way that they have tried, there's a ban on social media, the overall digital ban we've seen. I want to come to that, but we have also with us Jauhar Saleem, who's a former ambassador. Ji, Jauhar Saab, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Joseph, there is, I want to particularly focus on the kind of, overall international community, the way that, Pakistan also has tried to bring it, to the attention of the international community. The carnage, the brutality that the Kashmiri brethren continue to face since so many years. In your opinion, is there, is the facade that India has painted for a while as a secular India that, is actually crumbling now as we speak? Are people beginning to, is the international community beginning to recognize that what's happening in Jammu Kashmir and at the hands of Indian armed forces and the Indian state is clearly against the norms of all legal, legality and humanity?
Yes. India's facade of secularism, I think that has been crumbling for quite some time now, and the world is pretty cognizant of that. And I think in many countries there has been a serious concern as to what direction India has taken. In India, which is totally obsessed with Hindutva, and where the minority rights, minorities have been marginalized and there are no minority rights. And particularly what has been happening in Jammu and Kashmir. I remember after the 5th August actions of 2019, those illegal actions, unilateral actions, and then they imposed a curfew and they jammed all, blocked all internet and telephone services, and sort of literally the whole valley was rendered into a huge prison. And there was so much coverage in the international media because, there were thousands of people were arrested, and then the reign of terror which had been unleashed earlier as well, even got worse. And for the next 2-3 years, there was a huge outcry in the international media, and probably that type of coverage, I think, the Jammu and Kashmir dispute did not receive for many, many years prior to that. But despite that, that has been happening. But the fact is that despite that, India has been able to evade, any international censure or, what to talk of sanctions, although the matter was discussed in the United Nations Security Council after a lapse of decades. But that is because of the international politics and India's weightage in that, and the fact it's such a huge economy, and the fact that it has such an important place in the Western chessboard, in the Indo-Pacific strategy of the U.S., for instance, and overall. So because of that, those reasons, many, although we have seen statements in the past, when I was ambassador to Germany, Chancellor Merkel, during that time, she visited Germany. This was after 2019 and August actions, and there she made a statement about the human rights violations in Jammu and Kashmir, illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and that was a sort of, I think totally unexpected, because the Indians were not expecting it. And there were similar statements from other global leaders as well. Although for most part, from the U.S., there was probably more restraint.
You yourself just mentioned that India does have an important place on the chessboard of world politics, and it has alliances, and all of that is true. But do you think that the ineffectiveness of the UN, we've also seen it's underscored even with regard to what's happening with Palestine. Do you think that it is, a case in point as far as Kashmir is concerned also, that we've seen statements come, we also know resolutions have been flouted, as far as clearly flouted in the case of Kashmir also. But there seems to be nothing that's happened, there doesn't seem to be any action that's been taken against India. India's foray into other countries and their territories has not just, it's not just Kashmir. We've also seen what's happened with regard to Canada. We've also seen what's happened with regard to, the US has also made a statement in that regard. So do you think that maybe in some sense things are changing, even if very, very little?
Yeah, I mean, there are two aspects here. One is the fact that does the world recognize what is happening? That is one. And is there enough awareness of that? I think there is to a great extent. And also Pakistan has played a big part in terms of our sort of our diplomacy and, in projecting all that. I mean, as ambassadors, for instance, when I was ambassador abroad to Germany and Italy, we used to not only apprise the governments, but the parliamentarians and the think tanks and the media and the intellectuals and opinion makers. So, this happens in all the big capitals as well. So the fact is that has been happening. But the other part, as I said, what is the world doing about it? And you yourself said that in the case of Palestine, we even saw a situation where in ICJ they were ruling, and then there was a situation where United Nations Security Council passed resolutions against Israel. And in ICC, there were charges were leveled against Israel. But despite that, the Israelis haven't stopped. In a similar way, what we see in Jammu and Kashmir is that despite all the outcry and despite all the statements that came from many parliaments and human rights organizations and the discussions in the United Nations Security Council and bilaterally as well, a lot of countries used, the governments used to tell us that they were impressing upon the Indians in their bilateral conversations with India, the need to sort of address those human rights issues and sort of violations and in some countries were even sort of more open. They would impress upon the right of sort of self-determination of Kashmiris, like Turkey, for instance, and other close friends of Pakistan. China has a very strong position on that as well. Historically, and many other countries. But the fact remains that Indians, like the Israelis, they because of the international politics and because of the fact that if you are a big, powerful country, then this concept of sort of sovereignty allows you to sometimes, unfortunately get away with a lot of things. But the thing is, then it's about time as well, because these type of issues, they fester sometimes for decades and decades. But eventually, sometimes you see, like for example, apartheid, which went on for decades and decades, but then crumbled. And similarly, the East Germany, which was divided into two countries forcibly, and there was a war between Berlin, in the midst of Berlin. Eventually, that crumbled as well. So we, inshallah, hope that one day, despite all the, the odds and all the, there is all the might of Indian economy and the and the geopolitics and and the fact that these countries, powerful countries, can get away with so many things. Despite all that, one day the Kashmiris would be able to win their right of self-determination, and Pakistan would continue to support them diplomatically, morally, politically. We have been very clear on that, and our support to Kashmiris would be unflinching, and it would be it would continue until that matter is finally resolved as per the United Nations Security Council resolution and as per the aspirations of the Kashmiri people.
Ambassador, thank you so much for your time. One hopes that, like Brigadier Sahib, like Jauhar Saleem Sahib is saying, that there is really, that kind of good news that can come. But in one or two things that he said, I think, are a stark reality. One, the place that India has, one has to acknowledge. And the second, that, the world UN resolutions, whether we talk about that, whether we talk about the way the international community reacts, that is what categorizes their response. So what is the option then for the kind of tyranny that's taking place?
I think challenges are there, but as I've been, I think, discussing earlier also. And I always, draw strength from what the Sikhs are doing for Khalistan movement. They don't have an independent state. It's only diaspora, and within diaspora there are 5 or 6, activists. In the Indian Punjab, it's not really disputed internationally. But for the Sikh rights, the way they have done, for Khalistan referendum, and put so much pressure on India that, as you mentioned, that India had to then send, death squads to, let's say, assassinate Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Then they did it with Avtar Singh Khanda in UK. And then they tried for Gurpatwant Singh Pannu in US, where then US probably realized was too much. India was probably getting out of its shoes and setting a new precedent. So I think if you look at Kashmiri diaspora, for instance, UK, look at Pakistani origin or Kashmiri origin, it's more than 1.5 million people, huge diaspora, much larger than the Sikh community. Then you have in North America, Pakistan as a state, and then you have Azad Kashmir government, which is the liberation camp of, it was declared, and you look at their flag. So it means that despite Pakistan's, I would say, economic challenges and maybe, comparatively lesser clout than India, still we are a very important country. I think, and then you add, our diplomacy. So all told, if I think a combined effort, concerted effort is done, because in 5 years the Kashmiris have also realized that as far as development, there were international conferences, investment conferences, they brought people from, right-wing European Union, also some of the MPs, to show normalcy. But ultimately it's 1.1 million, Indian soldiers and paramilitary which is doing it. And you can't, if you see it in Bangladesh, I mean, the students just caught up, because in this time of information age, it's very difficult to, I think, suppress the minds. And Kashmiri youth is very vibrant. And I think I mentioned that south of Pir Panjal, there is now some simmering current. And people are now started to, maybe pick up the gun and fight with the Indian. And in case this also permeates into Valley, which is much larger, I think we should not lose hope. And we look at YOUM-E-ISTEHSAL. One, of course, it is the formation of our commitment. And I'm sure tomorrow highest level of leadership is going to do it. And for us, in the information domain, I think it's a duty that we take this cause through, social media, through, seminars, through diplomacy. It is possible. Maybe it will take a while, but definitely there is a cause that we have to support.
no doubt, I think undoubtedly we all need to do whatever we can. We've also, Zaman Sahab, we know that, the Prime Minister is also expected to meet with the Kashmiri leadership. He's also expected to visit Muzaffarabad to show solidarity with Kashmiris. He's also going to be delivering an important policy statement, which is, among the things that Pakistan, of course, is very, always there for the Kashmiri cause. We always stand behind our Kashmiri brethren. In your opinion, let's talk about the youth and, mobilization of youth. Like right now, Brigadier Sahab also mentioned, mobilizing perhaps the diaspora and the youth, overall for the cause of Kashmir. How do we do that?
First, I will add on the Ambassador Jauhar's point. When we are talking about the UN role, there is a lot of positive things regarding that. There was 2 UN reports about the situation of Kashmir after the illegal acts of 2019. There was a report in 2018 and there was a report in 2019. And in that report, there are very strong and powerful reports again for our case. In that report, they told that the whole systematically India is involved regarding the human rights violations, regarding the illegal laws over there. So these are the positivities which comes from the United Nations. And today we talk about the Kashmir. What's the base? The base is the UN resolution 5 January 1949 resolution. So the right to self-determination is comes under UN agenda. So all the resources, all the political will and political powers of the India, still the case of Kashmir is on the agenda of UN. That is because of the sacrifices of the people of Kashmir and the efforts of Pakistan diplomacy. Pakistan diplomats are fighting the case of Kashmir on the all world arenas, and we are not just saying, we are the real advocates of the Kashmiris. You ask about the role of youth. The youth of Kashmir is very brave. They for not a single day they forget their cause. They are with that, and we had some of the young journalists and the young lawyers from the Indian occupied Kashmir. They registered a case at UN and in UK against these illegal actions. And every day they are writing about that. You are talking. We can talk about the journalist Fahd. How he was put behind he was a journalist. He was put behind the jail due to his stories. There is a lot of other cases. We talk about the Khurram Parvez. He wrote the report Structures of Violence. He narrated that how India is taking illegal actions against the Kashmiris, and there is a compilation of the thousands of the cases which are under the Indian legal system, and he compiled that report and presented to the UN. And now on the basis of that report, the special rapporteur of the religious affair and for the freedom, expression of the freedom, they just show their concern about the illegal action of India. So all are these positive steps which are took by the youth, and the story of Kashmir is listened all across the world.
Fair enough. In terms of Brigadier Sahab, you mentioned, and I think that we were talking about this yesterday also, the role of the diaspora. Do you think to mobilize the diaspora, do you think that perhaps there has to be a consistent effort that perhaps needs to be more vigorous now, in terms of course there's August 5th, and like I said, Pakistan does do whatever we can and whatever is at our disposal, but to mobilize the diaspora to actually agitate on all fronts, whether we talk about publishing reports, whether we talk about agitating, whether we talk about people coming out, because although for the Palestinians nothing really has changed, but we've seen thousands and come out in support all over the world, and perhaps we also, for Kashmir, that kind of effort is necessary also, at the very least.
Yeah, I think I would say that we need to do more. You're right that there will be certain important landmarks and dates like 5th August or YOUM-E-ISTEHSAL-E-KASHMIR or days of accession of Kashmir or 5th February. But it should be actually a constant effort, and there are a number of I would say think tanks and organizations doing it. But I feel that from Pakistan and Azad Kashmir side, there need to be more comprehensive, focused effort. diaspora is already there. If you look at a lot of work, as I think was pointed out by our friend here, the people are doing it. If you go to North America, you know, there are, like Azala Beeb is doing a very good job, and whenever there is, you know, and then they are also coordinating with, you know, the Sikh element who would join the rallies, because probably they also appear to have the same cause. So if you look at Europe and UK, as I mentioned, maybe it's more than 1.5 million diaspora, which is very, very strong.
Yes.
So in case you have consistent effort, like for instance, small little steps that we can do is on Twitter or X, is the spaces you discuss, you know.
Yes.
And then at time you get, you know, even people from across who will join, especially diaspora from occupied Kashmir studying abroad, and then it resonates. So there's, I think, I would not say there is a lack of effort, but the strategy has to be more cohesive, focused, and I would say perpetual, because this is one cause.
But do you think that within India, for example, when we talk about what's happening, internal situation of India, do you think that the cause of Kashmir is, you know, highlighted by the treatment that is meted out to their own minorities also? Because we are seeing, you know, it's not just about Muslims of Kashmir anymore. It's about those minorities that live within India also. We've seen it happen to the Muslims inside, the Christians, you know, the Dalits also. It's so that Modi India, perhaps, you know, that is what's making the writers talk about it, whether we talk about, you know, the reports that are being published. So maybe that is something that will perhaps, you know, highlight the cause of Kashmir within all over the world also.
Yeah, I think India has a lot of fault lines, as you mentioned, and the way Modi has operated after 2014. This is the third term going.
Yes.
So if you look at every minority, and incidentally they are majority, actually, you can look at the 77% oppressed class is actually the majority being suppressed by 23% upper caste. And
we've seen that in the results of the elections.
Yes, there is a pushback. You could see it in the northeast, you could see it in Punjab, you could see it in you know, south. So I would say that definitely Modi has himself, you know, I would say, or RSS that triggered these fault lines where we can definitely, looking at plight of Muslims within India, the issues of, you know, Gaur Raksha or Ghar Wapsi or Love Jihad and all that. I think it backfired even in Uttar Pradesh, the main hub of, let's say, Hindutva. And then you come to Christians, you know, case of Father Swami, and then you know, there were liberal voices like Gauri Lankesh and Professor Dubalkar who were assassinated by RSS death squad. So, and if you look at South India, they don't endorse these policies. They are very different than the North. And same is true, I think, if you look at pushback by the Congress, it was a result of, I think, Modi's actions. And so it means there is a lot of space within India, especially the liberal left and people of conscience, that they would not like what is happening to people in occupied Kashmir or Manipur or in other areas, in Naxal hit areas. So there is a lot of space that I think can be exploited within India also, and you are right.
Zaman sir, there is, you know, the role of the Indian Supreme Court we've seen has been, I think Duheri Sahab also earlier talked about it, for, you know, it's been historic in the way that it has, you know, been used. They're clearly co-conspirators in the way that, you know, the abuse is happening, in the way that the tyranny is happening, and there's no denying that. We've also seen mass rituals and funerals of leaders like Said Ali Gilani that were disrupted, bodies were forcibly taken from their families. There's no end to the brutality that's happened in the Kashmir. We saw the pellets, you know, the way that they destroyed the gun pellets, and the images are clearly, you know, horrific. Do you think that the youth there, are they mobilizing, are they grouping together, are they, you know, of course, like you said, they're extremely resilient and they will continue to fight. Do you think that the media bans there, you know, do you think now there's a chance that something from the valley can, you know, transcend these bans that India has imposed?
First of all, the alliance of the Modi and their judiciary, actually the alliance against the all the status of Kashmir, and they revoked that. So obviously the judicial system of India is with their government, and they are in favor of their what the Modi did against the Kashmiris. But there is a lot of, I already mentioned that there is a lot of positive things which are very, you can say that blessing in disguise. Like that, there was a realization among the youth of Kashmir, not only the valley, from the Ladakh, from the Jammu, from many months, the people of Leh and Ladakh, they are outside the people of Kargil. They are on the streets, and actually first they were just narrated, they were propagating that this issue is only related to the valley. But now their claims are failed, their narrative is actually fall down. Now this moment and is getting momentum in the Jammu region, in the Ladakh region, and in Kargil. So all these things are very positive for this Kashmir conflict, for the solution. I just want to say that it's a long marathon.
Okay.
We, the people of Pakistan and the people of Kashmir, they have to prepare themselves for a long marathon. Actually, the story of Kashmir, the case of Kashmir is very strong. But there is some ways we have to adopt for the narration. We have to bring the story of Kashmir, the humanitarian story of the Kashmir, the culture aspect of the Kashmir, how this dispute is actually affecting the culture of Kashmir.
I think that's a very relevant thing that you mentioned, the story of Kashmir. Do you think that, we talk about, like you said, we could talk about the war that's happening there, the resolve of the youth there, but do you think that the story is being told enough? I think that's very important, and the way that it should be told all over the world, whether we do it by writing papers, whether we do it by writing books, whether we do it by making visuals, whether we use social media. Those are the really, really important details, right?
The involvement of the youth and the role of youth is also very important to narrating the story of Kashmir.
Okay.
All the things which are happened after the illegal action of 2019 gone on the viral on the international media, and all these stories were reported by the young Kashmiris. So Kashmiri, they know how to express, how to bring their story to the world, and world is listening. So actually now we the youth of Pakistan have to help of our brothers and sisters in the Kashmir. We have to use social media. We have to use our phone for their help. We have to narrate and propagate about what is happening over there on social media. We have to use actually we have get the help from the data. Data is very important when you are building a narrative. So we were talking about the arrest from 2019 to date, to more than 25,000 people were arrested. More than 4,000 human rights activists and the political leaders were put behind just to chant their narrative of Azadi. So we have to talk about these stories. More than 123 women were raped after 2019. This so we have to tell the world about these stats. But
so
these
there's
stats,
also, they say that there is this excessive use of snipers and cluster munition along the line of control. I want to talk about that. Let me go to Brigadier Saab. I'll come back to you. Brigadier Saab, use of women and children as human shields. There's nothing that, forced labor and minefields, brutal tactics by the Indian Army. There is, these are human rights violations. There is, do you think, a world where Palestine is happening? Let's take a broader perspective, where Kashmir is happening. There is, the kind of, the humanity is clearly failing, right? We are constantly told about the clout of India. We are told about, the power that India holds overall, whatever they mean as a market, what they mean to the world. But the question is, isn't it time to reflect on a world where, there is so much inhumanity, there is so much brutality, and what does this mean for our region particularly? Because we are, nuclear nations. It's a volatile, potentially volatile region. Do you think that, the world also and the powers need to keep an eye on this, because clearly it's a charged region, so to speak?
Yeah, I think it's an important aspect, the human aspect. And if you look at two pillars of oppression, or on one side we have the Zionist, as you mentioned, and calculations suggest that 3 Hiroshima-sized bombs, equal ordnance has been delivered on Gaza, very narrow step. And you've seen the loss of, and then look at the, I would say, arrogance of Israel, that it assassinates a leader in Iran, in another country. And now look at what India is doing. So it means that there are 2 states who are one, of course, so-called democracies, but they are out of control. And one, they are doing, basically it's the Zionist ideology, I would say, or the fascist agenda in India or Zionist agenda in Palestine.
Based on just the fact that they can do it.
They can do it because they have support. Like Israel has, definitely a blank check from West, and India has so-called clout. But I think India also has some challenges also, which definitely can be exploited. But main thing is when you come to human rights and these big organizations of human rights and Amnesty International would who raise hue and cry on very small issues in Pakistan or anywhere else, let's say even in Iran. But they will be maybe publicly they come up with some reports, but as far as the governments in the West are concerned, publicly they will never condemn it. If you look at reception by Netanyahu in Capitol Hill, standing ovation, 38 times they were getting up, and same is probably treatment given to Modi.
Exactly. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. We'll come back after a short break to talk more about what's happening in Kashmir, the brutality that is at play in India, by India, of course, the role of their Supreme Court, their change in demography, and of course the effort that Pakistan is making and the world, the diaspora all around the world continues to make to talk about and further the Kashmiri cause. Please stay with us.